And ladies and gentlemen, capital G here, welcome back. Hope everyone's doing okay, especially my neighbors to the south. It's definitely been a crazy week. Not going into the politics behind everything that happened. That was, it's not my expertise, shall we say. It's not necessarily my country, but it's definitely something that the world has observed. And I will say, right now, really the only thing that matters is that everyone who's still with us is just chilling out at home. If you're illegal, have a nice drink on the rocks. If you're underage, have a nice cold glass of lemonade. And just relax and let's get through the next couple of weeks, shall we? In the meantime, let us move on to Vial Smasher the Fierce. Now, I'm surprised I've not talked about Vial Smasher before. I felt like I had, but I go through all my old videos and I'm like, wait, I never did my Vial Smasher deck. Used to run Vial Smasher as a solo commander. Yes, she has partner. No, she shouldn't be solo, but I did because I had a really quirky game plan. So, let's talk about Vial Smasher herself. A red, a black, and 1 generic mana gives us a 2/3 Goblin Berserker. Whenever we cast our first spell each turn, we choose an opponent at random, deal damage to that opponent equal to the converted mana cost. Actually, to that player or planeswalker that player controls, which I usually just dome my opponents. I never really consider the fact that the Vial Smasher can in fact hit planeswalkers. You do get to choose your opponent before you choose whether or not to hit the opponent or the planeswalker, so that is important to note. But yes, she has partner, which means she could have gone with Kaidel, for example, or she could have gone with, well, any of the original partners. Again, I didn't run Vial Smasher for partner because I took it as a challenge upon myself to just run her solo. But with the release of Commander Legends and another like 35 options for partners, it's no longer excusable, I don't think, to run Vial Smasher solo. So I decided to pair her with Gilanra, Caller of Wildwood. So this elf, goblins and elves, this elf, green and 2 generic mana, gives us a 1/2 elf druid. Tap it for a green mana, and when we spend this mana on a spell with converted mana cost 6 or greater, we get to draw a card. So, of course, Vial Smasher, there's a couple ways to do it. You can either play a bunch of instants and, you know, randomly dome everybody every turn, or you can just play a bunch of big spells and randomly dome someone for a lot. That's what we're going with. We are randomly doming people for a lot of damage with big expensive spells. But what kind of big expensive spells? Well, we're not going to spoil anything just yet. Let's talk about some of our artifacts first. Starting with the Arcane Signet. Of course, we get to tap for 1 mana in any color of our commander's identity. So taps for any of our colored mana. And Forsaken Monuments. I wonder if you're starting to get suspicious. 5 mana for this legendary artifact. It says that colorless creatures we control get +2/+2. And whenever we tap a permanent for a colorless mana, we get to add an additional colorless mana. And whenever we cast a colorless spell, we gain 2 life. Again, are we getting suspicious yet? In the meantime, while we stew on that, let's talk about the rest of our rocks, including the Signets. Running all 3 possible ones, the Golgari Signet, a Grill Signet. Mana Crypt is here. We're wrapping up to some big spells, so I am splurging a little bit with this particular list. The Prismatic Lens, it taps for a colorless, or we can pay any kind of mana into it to filter it into a mana of any one color. The last of our Signets, the Rakdos Signet. Skyclave Relic is here. Again, it's indestructible. It taps for all our colors, and if we kick it, we've got 3 of them. Sol Ring. Running the talismans, because the talismans can tap for a colorless mana, or it can tap for a colored mana in exchange for dealing a damage to us. So Talisman of Impulse for the red-green, of Indulgence for the black and red, or the Talisman of Resilience for the green and black. Thran Dynamo, 3 colorless mana. We're accelerating into some big spells. Toma Legends is here. This is a good way to draw some extra cards for us on the cheap. Urza's Incubator. When this enters the battlefield, we get to choose a creature type. We're playing tribal. We're playing stuff that cares about colorless. What's going on? Well, before I answer that, I'm just letting you know that Mitch is here to play with us too. So yeah, what are we choosing with Urza's Incubator? Like, what creature type are we possibly wanting to reduce by 2? And the answer is Eldrazi. We are playing Jund Eldrazi. Now, why would we want to go Jund Eldrazi instead of just running, say, Kozilek? Well, the answer for that is that by running colored commanders, we get access to the devoid Eldrazi. So the ones that have a colored mana cost but are still colorless when they're on the stack, they're still colorless when they're in our hand, they're still colorless at all points of the game. So Artisan of Kozilek is not an example of this, by the way. Of course, it's 9 generic mana, gives us a 10/9, lets us bring a creature back from our graveyard, Annihilator 2, so making our opponents sacrifice 2 permanents whenever this turns sideways. Yeah, Artisan of Kozilek. And hey, Vowel Smasher on the field, we just domed somebody for 9. Bane of Galabed. Very similar to Artisan of Kozilek. We don't get the recursion, but we do force our opponents to exile 2 permanents whenever we swing at them. Now here's an example of a devoid Eldrazi, the Barrage Tyrant. Yes, there's red in the color identity, but it is a colorless card at all points of the game. So red and 4 generic gives us the 5/3 creature, and by spending the red and 2 generic, we get to sacrifice another colorless creature and deal damage equal to that creature's power to another creature or player. Actually, in fact, because that was before some of the errata, before some of the rules in terms of damaging planeswalkers, we can in fact target a planeswalker with this. We can see that down here, any target. Birthing Hulk, 7 mana for a 5/4 Eldrazi. That seems kind of weird, but when this enters the battlefield, we get 2 Eldrazi Scion tokens. So the Eldrazi Scions, they're 1/1s. They can be sacked off for a generic mana. We've got a bunch of cards that create Scions, so I'm not going to repeat it. Scions can sacrifice for mana. Just know that. Also, by paying a colorless and a generic mana, we get to regenerate the Birthing Hulk. So, yeah, this can survive most board wipes. Breaker of Armies, a 10/8, 8 generic mana, and all creatures able to block this must do so. Very appropriate name. Most armies will fall to this one creature. The Brood Butcher. It is a green and black and 3 generic for this 3/3 Eldrazi. Again, devoid, so keep in mind, it is colorless. When this enters the battlefield, we get 1 Scion. And we can also pay a green and a black and sacrifice a creature to give another creature -2/-2 until end of turn. Brood Monitor. Double green and 4 generic mana gives us this 3/3 drone. And this gives us 3 Scions. So that's actually really good. It is still 6 mana for 6 power. And 3 of those creatures can, of course, sacrifice for more mana. Really ramps us up to the biggest and baddest of our spells. Catacomb Sifter. Again, Golgari colors, a black, green, and a generic. But again, devoid. Completely colorless card. And when this enters the battlefield, we get a 1/1 colorless Scion. Also, whenever another creature we control dies, scry 1. How cool is that, especially with the fact that we can generate a bunch of scions. Deceiver of Form. Now this is 6 generic and a colorless for this 8/8 Eldrazi. Very, very efficient. And at the beginning of combat on our turn, we can reveal the top card of our library, and if a creature card is revealed this way, you may have creatures we control other than the Deceiver become copies of that card until end of turn. That includes the Scions, by the way. If you have leftover Scions when this hits a creature, those Scions aren't just little 1/1s anymore. They could be humongous. Desolation Twin, 10 mana, 10/10, and then when we cast the spell, we get a 10/10 token. Nasty, nasty little card. I like it. Dread Defiler gives us a black and 6 generic mana for a 6/8. And we can pay a colorless and 3 generic mana to exile a creature card from our graveyard, and then target opponent loses life equal to that card's power. So it lets us recycle dead Eldrazi and deal more and more damage. Dust Stalker is here. 5/3 with haste. Costs a red, a black, and 2 colorless, or 2 generic in fact. And at the beginning of each end step, if we don't have another colorless creature on the board, we get to return this to our hand. What's cool about that, by the way, is that we can cast it, deal damage with Vial Smasher, bring it back to our hand, repeat. The Eldrazi Obligator. Eldrazi Obligator. A red and 2 generic mana gives us a 3/1 with haste. When we cast it, we can spend an additional colorless and generic mana to gain control of another creature until end of turn. It untaps, it gains haste. Emerald's here. Recently traded for it, and it says it costs 13 mana. Generally costs less, as long as we have cards in our graveyard, instants, sorceries, lands, what have you. That cost goes down. Flying, trample, protection from instants. We get to steal one of our opponent's next turns. Yes, they get another one to kind of recover afterwards, but the damage will already have been done by that point. Endbringer is 5 generic and 1 colorless for this 5/5. It untaps during each other player's untap step. And it has 3 cool tap abilities. The first one, for free, it's tap, deal damage to a target creature or player. The second ability, you pay a colorless, target creature cannot attack or block this turn. Or if you have 2 colorless, tap it to draw a card. Essence Depleter, this little 2/3 drone quietly drains our opponent's lives. We pay the colorless and the generic to have an opponent lose 1 life and we gain 1 life. Eyeless Watcher. When this enters the battlefield, we get 2 Scions. So yes, this is a 1/1 for 4 mana, but we get 2 Scions that we can ramp into something better. Kozilek's Channeler. Very flexible little card. It's 5 mana, it's a 4/4, so a little behind curve. But this can tap for 2 colorless mana, so we can ramp up, or we have a moderate beater. Kozilek, the Great Distortion, of course, is here. Cost 8 generic and 2 colorless for this 12/12 menacing creature. When we cast it, if we have fewer than 7 cards in hand, we draw up to 7. And we can discard a card to counter a spell, as long as the card that we discard is the same mana cost as the spell we are countering. Oblivion Sower, this 6 mana Eldrazi is in fact ramp, and probably one of the cooler cards. 5/8, so pretty good stats. And when we cast it, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of their library. If any of them we hit our lands, we get those lands onto the battlefield under our control. The Rune Processor, 7 mana for a 7/8. When we cast it, if one of our opponents has a card in exile and we want to let them have it back in their graveyard, we gain 5 life for doing so. The Scion Summoner, this green and 2 for this 2/2 Eldrazi. When this enters the battlefield, we get a Scion. The Sifter of Skulls is a black and 3 generic, gives us a 4/3, and whenever another non-token creature we control dies, we get a Scion. Now remember that because of the change in the rules for how commanders re-enter the command zone. That was done earlier this year. We've got 2 commanders that could die. They'll hit the graveyard just long enough for Sifter of Skulls to trigger and then return to the command zone. Awesome. Void Winnower, because that way our opponents can't even. Old joke, of course. 9 generic mana gives us the 11/9. Our opponents cannot cast spells with even converted mana costs. And our opponents can't block with creatures that have even converted mana costs. The Warden of Geometries, this 2/3 for 4 mana, has Vigilance and can also tap for colorless mana. And Worldbreaker, one of the big payoffs for running green in this deck. Green and 6 generic mana gives us a 5/7. On casting Worldbreaker, we can exile an artifact, enchantment, or land. It has reach, so it can block flyers. And we can pay a colorless and 2 generic and sacrifice a land to return this from the graveyard to our hand. So yes, a sweet, sweet card. So before I continue on to the enchantments, actually, you'd be surprised how relevant the fact that all of our creatures are colorless truly is. I've seen people try to minus Ugins to wipe the board. Our creatures are colorless. We're immune to that. I've had people swing at me with creatures equipped with, say, Sword of Fire and Ice. I can still block. A lot of people forget that devoid even exists. So they'll look at my board. They'll see they initially see black, red, green creatures, whatever, swing in, and get surprised and get caught off guard when I, block their creature and take it down. So yeah, it's a fun little mechanic. It catches a lot of people sleeping. And, well, nobody expects Vial Smasher to lead an Eldrazi army. Nobody. So moving on, Awakening Zone, one of the few actually colored cards in the deck. Colored permanents, I should say. This, on our upkeep, creates Eldrazi spawn tokens. Now, spawns don't have a power. They're just 0/1s. But they can still be sacrificed to give us colorless mana. From Beyond generates Scions for us on our upkeep. It also has the added ability of, you pay your green, you pay your generic mana, and you sacrifice From Beyond to go get an Eldrazi card. So later in the game, when we really need to find a big beater, we can go get it. And Guardian Project is here to help us draw some cards. Of course, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature we control or a creature in our graveyard, draw a card. Simple as that. Moving on to some instants. Bedevil, very flexible targeted removal, black, black, and red, destroy an artifact, creature, or planeswalker. And also Seb McKinnon. Love Seb McKinnon and his work. Cauldron Dance. Here's a classic from, I think back from Invasion Block. That can catch some people sleeping. For 6 mana, we can only cast this during combat. But for a red, a black, and 4 generic, we get to return a creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield with haste. That creature then will if it survives, return to our hand. And then we can put a creature card from our hand onto the battlefield with haste, and it will go to the graveyard at the beginning of the next end step. So someone who's not expecting it will all of a sudden be staring down 2 more Eldrazi creatures that they really weren't expecting on their combat, be it attacking us or us attacking them. Good on the offense, good on the defense. Fury Storm, great little card, especially when you're running 2 commanders, because each commander contributes to the Commander Storm ability of this, shall we say. So when you cast a spell, you copy it for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. So either one. They both count. We get to choose new targets for those copies. And the spell's effect itself, copy target instant or sorcery spell, and choose new targets for the copy. Good stuff. Kozilek's Return, sweet little instant. Deal 2 damage to each creature. Other than our Scions, we only have 1 creature that could actually die to this. And I mean, they'll return to the command zone, so we get to recast them later. So, We cast it, deal 2 damage to each creature. And when it's in the graveyard, if we cast an Eldrazi spell with converted mana cost 7 or greater, we could choose to exile this card from our graveyard and deal 5 damage to each creature. So this can wipe small creatures in the early game. It can wipe medium-sized creatures in the mid-game if we need to. Malakir Rebirth, great little instant here. Choose a creature, we lose 2 life, and until the end of turn, if that creature dies, it comes back onto the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. If we really can't use this spell for whatever reason, we can always play it as a land. Soul Shatter. Great little removal. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost amongst creatures or planeswalkers they control, and we can cast this at instant speed. I thought this was one of the sweetest spells from Zendikar for our format, so great little piece of removal. 37 lands. We're casting a lot of expensive stuff. We're going to need those lands. Ash Barrens. If we play it, it taps for colorless. Or we can pay the 1 and we can cycle it off for a basic land. Whenever we need, whenever we have this card. Bonder's Enclave. We can tap it for colorless, or we can pay 3 generic, tap it to draw a card. We can only draw that card if we control a creature of power 4 or greater, but that's pretty much most of our Eldrazi, isn't it? Command Tower gives us access to all of our colors. This will not tap for colorless, but it will tap for red, green, or black. Corrupted Crossroads, on the other hand, comes in untapped, taps for colorless on its own, or we can tap it and pay a life to get a black, a red, or a green, one of our colors. We can only use the colored mana on devoid spells. That's fine. Crumbling Vestige. Seems like a little odd ad, but hey, we play the land. We get one of our... it comes in tapped, but we do get a mana of any color of our choice when we play it. So ideally, we're going to play the land, spend that mana right away, and on future turns, this taps for colorless. Eldrazi Temple. Comes in untapped. We can tap it for 1 colorless mana, or if we're spending it to cast an Eldrazi spell, tap it for 2. Field of the Dead. This comes into play tapped. We have so many different lands in the deck that it's really easy to get to lands with 7 different names. Really easy. So this is here for the extra value. It's not flavorfully correct, I guess. There's no flavor reason for this. It's pure value if we manage to get this in the game. We are running all 3 of the possible Lauren filter lands. So of course how these works is that they come in untapped. They can tap for colorless mana. Or if we happen to have other sources of colored mana, we can pay, in this example for Firelit Thicket, a green or red, and tap the land to get double red, double green, or green and red. We're running all 3 possible versions of this in the deck. 6 Forests, a Gaia Reach Sanitarium, again, longtime favorite. Lets each player draw and discard a card. Graven Cairns, as per the Firelit Thicket. In this case, it's black or red to get those colors. Running the Jund Panorama. This can tap for colorless mana on its own, or if we don't need it anymore, we can use it to go get a Swamp Mountain or Forest card. Running the Pain Lands, for the same reason as we're running the Pain Talismans, they can tap for a colorless on their own, or we can take the Pain to take the colored mana. Llanowar Waste, same deal. 6 Mountains, the Sanctum of Ugin, again, comes in untapped, gives us access to colorless mana, and whenever we cast a colorless spell with converted mana cost 7 or greater, we can sacrifice this land to go get a colorless creature card. Sulphurous Springs, same as the other Pain Lands. 6 Swamps, 1 Tainted Peak. We are actually running the Tainted Peak and the Tainted Wood. What makes these cards cool, they come in untapped, they tap for colorless mana, and once we have a swamp in play, we have access to black and red if we're playing the Tainted Peak, and black or green if we're playing the Tainted Wood. Twilight Mire is the last of the Lauren filter lands. And if we just happen to have nothing but colored sources and we really, really need to search out a basic, we're running 1 wastes. 2 planeswalkers. Again, I've talked about how effective or ineffective, in fact, that Ugin is against us. So let's have Ugin work for us. So running both Ugin the Ineffable and Ugin the Spirit Dragon in this build. So in the case of Ugin the Ineffable, of course, 6 generic mana gives us a 4 loyalty planeswalker that says colorless spells we cast cost 2 less. So yes, cost reduction on the core of our deck, absolutely will take it. Also gives us a weird form of card draw where we get to exile the top card of our library and basically turn it into a 2/2 spirit token. If that token ever leaves the battlefield, we get to put the exile card into our hand. We can also do the -3 and destroy a colored permanent. Excellent, excellent planeswalker for us. As is Ugin's original form, Ugin the Spirit Dragon. 8 generic mana, 7 loyalty. The +2, yeah, deals some damage to any target, 3 damage to any target. The -X though. Exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less, that's 1 or more colors. Again, the vast majority of our board is in fact colorless. So Ugin is going to wipe away all of our opponents' pretty much all of our opponents' permanents, whereas we're going to lose 1, maybe 2. And everyone else loses 5, 6, 7, 8, however many permanents they have. 8 sorceries, running Allure of the Unknown. This is a little risky. This is a very fun card to play with, a very risky card to play with. This black, red, and 3 generic sorcery says we get to reveal the top 6 cards of our library and have one of our opponents exile a non-land card from among them. So what happens here is that we get the other 5 cards into our hand. That opponent can cast the exile card for free. Very risky stuff, but the payoff is 5 cards in our hand, and we might curry some political favor with this as well in the course of the game. Call the Scions. This simple little sorcery gives us 2 Eldrazi Scion tokens. Casualties of War. Double green, double black, 2 generic. It's kind of, the mana cost is a little awkward, but the effect is wonderful. Destroy an artifact, destroy a creature, destroy an enchantment, destroy a land, destroy a planeswalker. Destroy the best of each type of permanent out there. And you don't need all 5 permanents present to cast the spell. So even if, say, there's no planeswalkers on the board, we get to use the other 4 effects at our leisure. Damnation. Sometimes you just need a good old-fashioned destroy everything. Damnation is here for that. And Decimate. Unlike Casualties of War, Decimate insists on there being an artifact, creature, enchantment, and land to target. I've never had this card stuck in my hand. I know a lot of other players don't like the card because of its strict targeting requirements. I've never had a problem. I've always had 4 targets. Always. Feed the Swarm. One of the great new pieces of targeted removal. Destroy a creature or an enchantment in mono black. It's a 2 mana sorcery that does this, and yes, we lose life equal to the permanent's converted mana cost, but hey, this is very, very efficient and targets a wide swath of targets. Grave Upheaval. We can cycle this away to go get any one of our basic lands, or we can pay the 6 mana, and we get to put any creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under our control with haste. So 6 mana might seem like a lot for the effect, but it's also here for the basic land cycling. We have that option of cycling it away if we don't feel confident in casting it over the course of the game. And Shadow's Verdict is going to round things out for us. This interesting little board wipe from Zendikar Rising. Double black, 3 generic. Exiles all creatures and planeswalkers with converted mana cost 3 or less from the battlefield and from all graveyards. So yeah, just take out all the small things and let our big things run rampant. The worst thing that can ever happen to an Eldrazi is getting chump blocked by a random 2/2, like a random squirrel token. Yeah, we don't want our Eldrazi blocked by a squirrel. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, that is Vial Smasher the Fierce, with a little help from Gilanra. On the topic of squirrels, lots of spoilers already coming out for Kaldheim. I wish they kind of spaced it out a little better, because there's still so much we can do with what came out last year already. That's, I don't know. I don't think I want to go too much into Kaldheim. At least I didn't think so. And then we've got gods that you can play it as a god creature on one side, or you can flip it and play it as something else entirely. One's an equipment, one's a planeswalker, and we'll see what the others look like as time goes on. I think they officially confirmed snow today. I'm still skeptical, but I'll definitely have to have a closer look. I think they've officially confirmed the presence of snowlands. So I'm just gonna follow that up and make certain of my facts. But yeah, we finally got snow in standard again. Apparently, I didn't think it was gonna happen actually. I never thought snow was going to return to standard, simply because of the fact that the last time we saw snow was in Modern Horizons, a format that skipped, a set that skipped standard and went straight to modern. So I guess it's happening now. If it is, honestly, I don't care. Snow was not something super important to me, and not super important to our format, really. Other than a couple of payoffs, like there's that black spell that's like all creatures get -X equal to the number of snow permanents you control. For example, or the artifact that lets you exile a land and then all lands of the same name tap for double mana, and that mattered with snow. But other than that, there's not really a lot of snow payoffs that have made it into Commander just yet. Maybe something changes in the next few months, but for the time being, let it snow, I guess. Cool. Anyways, with that in mind, I'm gonna call it here. Sorry, it's a little dark in the room. I have to get a new light for my computer desk at some point. But yeah, it's time for bed. So, like I said, sleep well. Have a nice cold drink, whatever your age allows you to drink, and we will see you all next time. Bye for now.